Hey everybody, welcome to the Fire Up with CJ show. Today we're going to be talking about self-love with Shannon Kaiser and about her new book that is coming out on August 29th. Yay! Are you excited?
I'm so excited every day. I'm like, yes, it's coming.
Okay, so the book is called The Self Love Experiment, and we desperately need self love right now, I think. Uh, the environment around us is so full of fear and on both sides, fear and hatred and a Molotov cocktail of chaos.
I
So,
agree 100%. Yeah, it's a
so
good time for this book to come out for sure.
yeah. So if there's something that, wherever people stand on the political spectrum, no matter whether they're political or not, or maybe they're just having a hard time, what's something that, where does self-love fit into all of this?
I think self love is the healer for us. I truly believe with every fiber of my body that it will help move the whole entire world forward. I know this because I personally spent almost 3 decades at war with myself,
Hmm.
and I hated myself. I couldn't even look in the mirror and say something kind about myself. And I was writing, my first book was called Find Your Happy. So I was
Mm-hmm.
teaching other people how to be happy. And
Right.
then it hit me one moment when I was looking in the mirror and I was crying. I was on a book promotion tour and I was like, how is this possible? I'm happier than I was, but how happy can you be if you don't love yourself?
Hmm.
And that's when I started the Self Love Experiment, which is a process that I did to dedicate myself to learn how to love myself. And in that process, I realized that if I could learn how to love myself, then that would be one less person hurting on the planet. That would be one less person in pain. That would be one less person at war with ourselves. And what happens is we raise the vibration on the planet. So when I learned and truly fell in love with myself, I recognized that you are able to be a bigger light in the world. And people who love themselves don't hurt other people. And so if we all start loving ourselves, then the pain that we're seeing in the world wouldn't be present.
Okay, so let's say that you're feeling pain from the current situation or a current situation that you are going through. What things would you help us experiment with on? Maybe we could try something and see how we may apply some of the experiments that you've learned to our current life.
I think it's so important to start to look within first and foremost. And a lot of the times, what we see out in the world is chaotic. It's really chaotic right now, and it
Hmm.
makes us feel hopeless. And even me, I've been questioning, my own role and feeling like if what I'm doing is enough. And all of us are feeling this kind of sensation. And so, what I would first do is go inward and allow yourself to feel your feelings, because a lot of us actually avoid our feelings because it's so hard to feel the pain that is present. And sometimes we do this by overeating, over exercising, overworking, overspending, even spending money. And so, anytime we're trying to avoid our feelings, the healing can't happen. And whether you're talking about looking at the political climate, healing a sore relationship or a troubling time, it all comes back to first being present with where you are. And so that's one thing I would ask people to really get honest and feel the pain that's there, because it is a painful time. But once you feel this, you start to see the love that is within all of us already. Kind of what we're feeling is the love rising up. And we know that we can make a difference. So once you do that, I would simply suggest use your voice, use your time, use your communication, talk to loved ones, start the dialogue, because when we ignore it, it gets bigger. And when we kind of shove these situations under the rug, that's why the things get bigger, right?
Hmm. Okay, so let's actually step the listeners through an experience when we do that. So, um, I will actually take something neutral. Okay, so I know that it's hard because there's, people on both sides are listening to this program and they may actually have a different experience. So I'm going to take something that's universal. Since we were just talking about that, my son is leaving for college in 4 days. And so, in that case, there's a sense of loss of some a loss of lots of different things, and that could be akin to losing a loved one. So I felt a lot of the same feelings that I'm feeling right now that I felt when my dad died many moons ago. And I think it could be you just broke up in a relationship. You may feel a loss from that. Or maybe the political climate right now feels like it's getting you so upset that you're just feeling lost and confused. Like, what world did I end up falling into. It's
Yeah.
so different than what I'm used to. So there's lots of these can be substitute whatever content you
That's
want
brilliant.
to. Okay, so I'm actually going to substitute the content of my son leaving in 4 days, and maybe you can step me through an experience, and listeners can step themselves through the same experience and see how they would use this information.
Absolutely. And I think this process can apply to every single situation in your life where you're feeling a little bit of pain or trying to make sense of a situation that is happening to you, or it feels like it's happening to you and you didn't quite expect it.
Okay.
So for this particular situation, again, I think the very first thing is to recognize how you're feeling, because you could easily avoid it by over cleaning or shopping or whatever, right?
Okay.
But feeling your feelings is key.
Okay.
And then
all right, wait, I'm going to do this. Let's have the listeners go through there. So I'm going to answer that first question, okay?
Okay.
So
Oh,
feeling your feelings. Okay, so here's how I do this. Do you have a specific way that you want listeners to go through and feel their feelings, or do you want me to just do it my own way?
So there's as part of the self-love experiment, and I say this in the beginning, is about you really honoring what feels right for you.
Okay.
So also as a life coach, I'm going to ask you to just go inward, because I could tell you a specific thing, but I know that everyone has their own way that it's going to work for them. So trust your inner guide through this. So for this particular one, you tell me what's working.
So here's what I'm going to do, just because listeners may want some method. So I'm going to assume that I'm going to do a body scan from bottom up, and then I'll tell you what I'm feeling. The question was, how am I feeling? Okay, so I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to take 3 deep breaths. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. And then breathe out. All right, and then I'm going to scan starting from my feet, like I'm doing a little CAT scan of my body. And then I'm going to tell you what I'm literally feeling on a body sensation. So I feel like my lower spine is a little bit congested. Something's going on. I feel like my neck and shoulders is really tight. And I feel like my in between my eyebrows, which some Eastern spiritual folks talk about as their third eye, feels a little bit just confused. And I feel like the top of my head, which some people say is your spiritual connection to above, whatever you want to describe above as, feels a little bit off. So that's what I'm feeling on the inside. And then you talk about listening to your body as a partner in healing. So how would you use that information? What would be the next step if you were going through that?
What's interesting is listening to our bodies is a very powerful way to go to the next level, because our bodies have an enormous amount of wisdom, but we also hold our pain and tension in our bodies. So you had specifically said your lower back and your shoulders. And as you said those, I recognize that a lot of times when we have pain in those spots, it could sometimes be posture, and it could sometimes be how we're sitting at our desk so many days, but more likely than not, it's an emotional pain that's manifested in that area. And back pain specifically is about how you see and hold yourself in the world. So pulling yourself forward is going to be key for you. And I am a firm believer in affirmations or mantras. And Louise Hay uses these as well. And so anytime we have back pain or shoulder pain, it's because we're afraid of what's coming, because we don't know. We're afraid to let go. So a powerful mantra you can use is, I am willing to live my life in new ways.
Okay, I'm willing to live my life in new ways. Okay, so as I understand it, and this work from Louise Hay has been around for a really long time, where she correlates, just for people who aren't familiar with what you just mentioned, she correlates physical pain that you feel in your body with potential emotional pain that you may be feeling or maybe not fully been conscious of. So get congruent with the physical pain and then figure out what that relates to in the emotional pain. So you're saying shoulders and back is a sense of, maybe it's like the world is pulling me this way and I'm pulling myself backwards, right? Exactly. Or I'm resisting the energy of moving forward. And so when I'm doing that, then the wisdom of Louise Hayes would say, hey, you're not moving forward. And so what you need to
Resisting
do.
moving forward. Yeah.
Yeah, so then it's and afraid of letting go, resisting moving forward. So is to say, I am willing to live my life in new ways. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So this is actually my affirmation that I put here, but I know that she has a lot of affirmations as well. So from the self love experiment, I recognize that too, where I was holding on to a certain part of my life that wasn't working because I was scared. I didn't know what was coming. And you're grieving the loss really of your son. And a lot of us in the political climate, where we're grieving the loss of so many understandings that we thought we knew. And so we really have to just, of course, be present with what's coming up for us. But then in your particular experience, what I would suggest also, and what really helps for listeners who are going through this kind of pain, is after you start repeating the mantra, and you repeat this when that fear comes in, when you start to feel anxious, or even when you focus on the pain, you're like, oh, my back, my shoulder's hurting. You can say that mantra, I'm willing to live my life in new ways, as you kind of touch your shoulder or send it some love. And then what I talk about in the self-love experiment is one of the principles is, in order to get what we want, we have to let go of what is not working or what's ready to be released. And Elizabeth Gilbert, the author of Eat, Pray, Love and Big Magic, talks about the first time I heard this concept was she said she was ready to be a professional writer. And she was kind of just dinking around, right? And she said, I had to give up watching The Sopranos all the time in order to dedicate myself to my craft. So sometimes we have silly Netflix shows we watch. Sometimes we have other things that, habits. But I'm saying this because I think for you, what's happening, and anybody who's going through this transition where we don't know what's happening, we're grieving a loss, but something's coming and we don't know what it is, you get to create possibilities for yourself. So you go and ask yourself, okay, well, I'm letting go of something that's ready to be released so I can open up to what's coming.
So I'll give you an example of what that may look like for listeners who are like, what does she mean? What is she talking about? My approach is from what I've learned is through a previous guest who's talking about recapitulation, which is a shamanic idea, which is to, you face your past and you look at the things that you like and want to continue forward. So, for example, in my particular case, I like that my children provide ritual structure and a reason to take vacations. Because when you have kids, you have to take vacations because they're on vacations. I love the rituals that we have during our family time. We've had all these sorts of rituals that have been built over the course of 20 years. And then we have, I also like the structure. I get up at 7 and then I get work done and I have to be really focused and dedicated to get work done so that I can have family time. Or when they leave, it would be personal time. But there's this those are the things that I look at and say, I want those going forward. In the future, I would like to keep those things and move forward.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful. And that's exactly the process. I think as you look at that process, what's key though is your kids will be at college. And so now there's going to be this big open space for more time for you.
Right.
And it really comes back to, what do you want to create for you? And that's where the self-love experiment or any self-love practice would come in to really, you can take a vacation with you. Maybe you want to go to the beach and do a writer's weekend, or you get to kind of teak these forward, but make sure you're
my own version of them. Right. Yeah. They may not look like vacation with the family, but there'll be a vacation with my husband or a vacation by myself or a staycation, whatever it looks like. So that there are things that you don't want to leave behind. And then I look at here and say, there are certain things as a mother that there is identifying yourself as a mother, and then you lose all the other aspects of your identity because that one becomes so strong. Prioritizing family first is something that I've done as a mother. I've also, you are a concierge, you are a limo driver, you are a project planner, you are the CEO, you are the CFO. So as a mom, you have all these roles. And I can look at those and say, I'm ready to retire from every single one of those.
That's a lot.
Yeah, blessings, happy retirement, God bless you. You've served me well. Thank you for the skills. And woohoo, walk away free to the future. So
Mm.
So that's at least how I interpreted what you're talking about. Is that
That's
what you
exactly
meant or
that's exactly it. And I think
okay.
it's up for everyone to interpret what feels right for them, and that's why I call it experiment. And so really you nailed it for you, and I think all of us listeners can relate. And that's really the key. So you're letting go of pieces of you, and now you look forward. I love how you're like turning because you're like, I'm looking forward. And that is the golden part right now. So really that's really the third part. Anytime we feel overwhelmed by what's going on or stuck in grief, the be in that, let that be part, but there is a point where you let the healing happen and you can move forward. And so moving forward becomes about you looking to what you want to create. So like you said, do I want to take a vacation with my husband, and actually, or do I want to go on a trip by myself, girlfriend getaway, taking action steps towards that. So a lot of times we think, wouldn't it be nice? But the truth is, what I learned in the Self Love Experiment, and there's a whole chapter on this, is that our dreams are so important to our fulfillment and being here on earth. And a lot of times we say we're just trying to get by. I can't make my dreams come true. I have so much to take care of. But when we allow ourselves, and the dream doesn't have to be this big grandiose thing, it's about, could be something very simple, maybe treating yourself to something nice. These dreams are part of your soul and your desire to be here and be present in the world. So the more we show up for the dreams and take action on them, the more we're fulfilled, and therefore the more happier we are for those around us, and the stronger family member we are, the stronger spouse, the stronger leader in the community. So for you, when I say, listen to the heart and the dreams that maybe are poking through, what comes up for you?
Um I would say that for me, that there are a bunch of things that I would have liked to have done on the work front, but that when you have a family, it just takes up so much time that I didn't have the time to do that. So over the last couple of years, I've been identifying the type of work I'd like to do. I've been doing individual coaching, would like to continue doing that. I'd like to do group coaching. That's a new thing, which is an extension of what I've been doing, really. And then I would like to do woman coaching and specifically women through the various stages. So
Yeah.
those are the three kind of new things that I wouldn't even say they're dreams so much as things that have emerged out of the universe. And
Yeah. And that's a dream.
yeah,
That's a goal.
yeah. No, I don't know if it's a personal dream, but for me, I have a different model where I don't think as much as dreams, but I think about if I am connected to the divine God, whatever, and if I listen very carefully and if I'm attuned to the messages, that I will be guided to where the universe needs me the most, and I will just follow. So they're not necessarily, my dream is to follow
Yeah.
the call of the universe. It sounds corny, but that is my dream. And so these are the thing. This is how they're manifesting. Don't know if they're going to be the exact implementation or look that way, but my general dream is to follow the universe's calling.
Yes.
And then what that looks like, I don't know.
Absolutely. And I don't think it's corny at all. And I know your listeners don't, because we all feel that that is really what it's about. It's about connecting inward, and inward is connecting to, your truth and the higher power and divine, as you say. So I think with that, when we align with our truth, the insights that come to us, like your group coaching and the women's coaching, that's part of your plan. And as you show up more for it fully, you start to see the pieces connect, right? So the next piece is to really recognize that everything's connected. Sometimes we can't see when we're in it. It feels
Mm-hmm.
chaotic.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in my depression and eating disorders, I would have never known that I had to go through that to now be the teacher and help people through that.
Mm-hmm.
So looking back, as Steve Jobs says, looking back, you can connect the dots, but while you're in it, you can't. And so the
Mm-hmm.
next part is to really just keep going forward and recognize that everything is connected.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's actually take this example and same set of tools, and I'm going to apply. It won't be necessarily my content, but content I've heard through clients or people who've gone through the same thing, just so people know how to take this same tool and apply it in lots of different contexts. So let's say that I just broke up with someone, and I'm sure you've heard this a lot with college kids, that's kind of a good portion of what's happening in their lives. So help me fill in the content. So it may be tuning in to how they feel, and there's a sense of loss. I'm not valuable. I'm not worth it. This person broke up with me. I'm sensing saying, what's wrong with me? All right, this may be a message, but maybe you can add the other content. What do you hear when you've talked to students about stuff like this?
You nailed it. It really comes back to a lot of times we end up blaming ourselves, and instead of we either attack the other person because we're hurt, or we come back to feeling like we did something wrong. So that's
Okay.
really
Yeah,
one of
they're a
what.
jerk. I don't know why they did this. They cheated on me. They did whatever on me. They're bad, evil, and
So
thank God I'm rid of them. Or what's wrong with me that they cheated on me? It can go either punitive one direction or towards yourself.
exactly
Okay, good. All right, so well, not good, but let's say that that's what happens.
identified.
Okay, so that's what happens, and so if one were to look and take whatever they, so the next step was to actually take. What was the next step again? To look and
Yes. So the first thing is to feel your feelings.
right.
And what I would add to this is very important is there's no time limit on your healing. Some friends will be like, get over this person right away. Or, 4 years later, you still could be dealing with that broken heart. So
Mm-hmm.
be compassionate to yourself. And I talk about this in the Self Love Experiment too. And specifically, I talk about a breakup that I
Mm-hmm.
went through. So taking the readers through the process of first be very compassionate with wherever you are. Wherever
Right.
you are is where you need to be. And then from there, you can say, okay, you get to a place where you realize you look back and you start to say what was working that I want to take forward into a new relationship, perhaps, or what wasn't working that I am definitely never going to do, right?
So I get here's what I get when I talk to people about this with my own coach. And please add your content so people can go, that's exactly how I'm feeling, or they're missing these three things. That's what I'm feeling. But they're all, so what I hear is, you know what? I feel so relieved that I broke up with them because I didn't realize how much of myself I gave away because I felt so disempowered, or they always made me feel XYZ or whatever. I hear that kind of content. What do you
Right?
hear when you actually
I hear a lot of times I thought I was happy. I really thought I was like happily married or happily in the relationship. And then all of a sudden, I really see who that person was. Or like, for example, if I've quite a few people that I know who have found out cheating and that kind of situation. So I actually hear where people realize that they were in a situation and then they get really honest and they say, actually, I wasn't that happy. I was just kind of going through the motions, or I was
Mm-hmm.
kind of ignoring the red flags because I wanted to be happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a dear friend who is a psychotherapist, and she's like, "Oh, people always know. They don't want to know, which is
That's
why
really,
they go through denial." How about for yourself? Because you said there's a chapter in the book that you wrote yourself when you went through the
yeah.
experience. What was your experience?
Specifically for me, I realized that I was in relationship after relationship and trying to find so hard to make it work when I knew it wasn't going to work. And I
Mm.
lose a piece of myself, relationship after relationship. It was a pattern because I wanted them to love me because I didn't love myself. I didn't know it.
Ah,
I
wow.
didn't know it.
Right,
But what I would do is overextend myself or try to be the person that I thought they would want
right,
versus who I really was.
right,
And I come to find that this is what a lot of women do because we want love so much, right?
right.
And so that was something that really showed up for me. So what I did is I decided after the last relationship was to go on a 1 year sabbatical, dating sabbatical, until I could really truly be present and my own best friend. And
Mm.
and it was so powerful. And I wrote a story, and it ended up in Chicken Soup for the Soul. And what was fun about that is it became this revolutionary journey to realize that I don't need someone else to love me because I love myself. In every relationship before, I was needing
Right. If you love me, then it validates that I'm worth it,
that I am
right?
lovable.
Versus, yeah, that I'm lovable, and or the other version that I see this package up is I can't be complete unless you complete me.
Exactly.
So
Yes.
so there are two different, and that's another echo of I'm not enough. In both
Right.
cases, it's I'm not enough, so I must be something, an extension of myself in order for you to love me, or
Right.
I must be in partnership in order for me to be complete. Those it seems like they're interrelated, I think.
They
Was
are.
it
I really feel that they're like two sides of the same coin, and they come back to our lack of self-love, really.
right? Right. So then your experiment where you took a year sabbatical of loving yourself, what did that look like? What I mean, I know it didn't involve no
Yeah.
dating, but how did you get to the point that you, so if I understand this correctly, it's say I'm complete. I'm complete and I love myself irrespective of whether anyone else loves me. I guess would that be the goal? What was the goal for you?
That's the goal, and that's where I arrived, and that's the gift the book gave me in writing the book. And I know that it will offer its readers if they're open and just kind of to the experiment. And the reason I say it that way is because for me it started as what was going to be 3 months, and then it turned into 1 year, and then it turned into 3 years.
Wow. Okay, so you've been on a sabbatical for 3 years?
I have, and I talk about that in the book. And it's not that it took that long to fall in love with myself. It's just that's what the experiment turned into. And so there's a lot of different levels and layers, but it really did start first and foremost with getting clear about how I was talking to myself about myself and who I was around different people to try to make them like me. I used to try so hard to be seen, but I recognized that I wasn't seeing myself. And that
Wow.
was a turning point for me. That's when
Wow.
I realized I need to allow myself to be who I am. And I was incredibly overweight when I started my self-love experiment,
Hmm.
almost 100 pounds overweight.
Wow.
And I thought I couldn't love no one could love me at that size. I felt completely invisible to the world, even though I was writing books and on a public sphere.
Right.
But what happened for me was I realized that I don't have to change myself in order to love myself.
That's a
Time.
big one, right? Because we're like, if only I'd lost that weight, or if only I had gotten that job, or if only I did this and whatever. It's like,
Yeah, or like if I have more money, then I can travel, or if I fix my teeth, then I can start dating again, or we do this. And I was putting my life on hold. And up until that point, I recognized that I was using these excuses and these reasons to feel like I wasn't good enough to really keep me outside of my life. And that's when I
mm,
said, you know what? This has got to go. So I jumped into my life, and that meant learning how to love the unlovable parts of me that actually aren't unlovable at all. And it
mm,
started as simple for the listeners, if you want to try this practice, waking up in the morning and looking in the mirror and saying something nice to yourself.
mm-hmm.
Starting to rub, I didn't like my stomach. It was overweight. So I bought nice lavender lotion and rubbed my stomach, my cellulite on my thighs and said, I love you, I'm sorry. And one of the most profound tools that radically really helped and changed my perspective was I wrote a letter. I talk about this in the book as well, to the pain point of me. I said, dear
Mm,
pain dear troubled part that is causing me pain. And we can do this with any part. We can write it if we want to write it physically or just in our mind. And you talk to the piece of you or the political situation or the ex or the amount of debt that you have, whatever it is that's causing you this frustration and overwhelmment. You can ask it, what are you here for? What are you trying to teach me?
mm, mm-hmm.
And my overweight body and my pain said, I'm teaching you that you're lovable no matter what. And that was,
Mm,
and again, it's connecting back inward.
yeah, that's it kind of reminds me when I was imagining the like rubbing the lotion on the part that you may not appreciate. I don't know why, because I like my forearm, but let's say I didn't like my forearm for some reason.
But like, if we have a scar somewhere,
Yeah, like it's there's this beautiful practice Ho'oponopono where it's
I
like I
love that.
love you, thank you, or I love you, please forgive me, thank you. I think that's it, or something like that.
I
I
think
love.
there's an I'm sorry in there and
I'm
forgive me.
sorry. Yeah,
Maybe,
please. Yeah, I love you. I'm sorry.
yes.
Please forgive me. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Right. So
And
if you're
yeah,
just looking at your stomach, it's like, I'm sorry that I've said so many mean things to you.
yeah. And that's
Please
the thing
forgive
is the,
me.
right, exactly.
I
Forgive.
love you.
Yes.
Thank you for holding all
Thank
that food
you.
in there.
I did. I did do that practice through the practice too, and it helps. Another one is tapping. Do you know, are you familiar? You can
Yeah,
tap
so
different
yeah, so
parts.
what would your tapping look like? Even though I have So even though my stomach
Okay.
is bigger than I'd like, I totally and completely love, honor, and accept myself. So there's a point in what's called your third eye or in between your eyebrows, and then it's
Yes.
outside of your eyebrows. Even though,
Oh.
what's your phrase? I don't know
Yeah,
what
so
you
that
use.
was perfect. But I think sometimes it's hard for us to get to love when we
Yeah.
still actively hate or
Right.
are in such shame. And that I was in so much shame. So I would say, even though my body is overweight, I know that I am a divine child of God and I'm made the way I'm supposed to be. It was something, similar to
Okay,
that.
right. So you're like
And
tapping, and then there's I have. Do you do this one where you're in
I
between your
haven't done
lips?
that one, but that would make sense
Yeah,
too.
this
I think
one.
I do this one, and
Yeah, I
then
do
isn't
this
it
one, this one. This is the gamut. Then they do this one
that one?
and
Yes.
this one, which is like pure magic because every single time I rub there, I'm like, oh, like
Oh, it's
what?
like all this tension just
Yeah, it's
releases.
like, wow, I didn't realize it's where your adrenals are. And then I've seen one where you do one under your armpit from the
Yep.
middle of your chest and then underneath your ribs where it's like right here underneath your bra line and for a woman's case. And then going through that over and over again until you release.
I feel better already. I feel,
Yeah, me too. Let's keep on doing this for the rest of the show.
talking for the rest of the time like this.
Okay, but that's a good. But you know what's interesting is I don't think people think about these things as self love, but they really are like little
Yeah,
techniques. They take a
yeah,
minute or 2 minutes in the morning, and you're like, I love my stomach, or
yeah.
I'm
I love my
beautiful.
body for healing,
Right,
and I began to say that. I love that I'm healing and showing up for me.
right.
I love, and what you said is so beautiful because we don't always recognize that all of the amazing things we're doing are self-loving. And
Hmm.
it's self-love sometimes we feel like it's selfish, but you being the best mom on the planet is one of the most loving things that you could do, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so we have to honor ourselves and celebrate the little victories. It's
Hmm.
just about being true to who we are.
Hmm. Hmm. So then there's so in that particular case, you spent 3 years. So you said there's 3 months in which you did these beautiful exercises in front of the mirror. And how did it evolve over the 3 years? And how did your self love, what trajectory did your self love take?
It's so wonderful, the process, because I thought that I was going to get to some destination and be like, I love myself. And really, it was like a peeling back of an onion, and each
Mm,
layer, more love was able to shine through. So there wasn't this aha epiphany, but more like this unveiling of truth, of love, because I feel like we all have this. And I say in the book too, one of the hardest things I've ever had to do is learn how to love myself, not because it's hard, but because there's so many beliefs that we've been conditioned. The world is always trying to tell us we should be different. It's because of all the stuff coming at us. And so for you to have the courage to show up is really the difference. And so
mm,
it did evolve in beautiful ways for me. And there's lots of different exercises that, of course, I talk about with you right now, with like the writing. To another exercise that was really helpful was a letter to my future self. Uh,
I like that.
when I was in my deep, deep, deep part of my pain, crying on the floor. I couldn't
Mm,
understand. This was before the Self Love Experiment, right when it started. Still trying to figure out, the big picture. And I said, well, what would the future me, maybe 5 years down the road me, the one who has this figured out, the one who is not suffering or feeling this pain, she's got it together. What would she say to me right now? And what's so beautiful is here I sit today, that future self, looking back on that wounded part of me. And, each time we can ask ourselves these messages, we align with our truth because our future self is us right now. It's just, pulling us forward. And so
mm,
she said, there's a couple different times in my self love experiment where I did that. But one specific time she said, you are doing an extraordinary job. And I was like, no, I'm
mm,
not. What do you mean? But she said, give yourself more credit. And that's
mm.
and so really this is just our inner voice talking to us or the love within.
Yeah, there was a beautiful exercise in neuro linguistic programming. I know there's a lot of there's a mixed jury on it, but I love neuro linguistic programming, and they have this is the present you, this is the past you, and this is the future you, and the
Yeah.
present you goes all the way to because usually your present you. which believes the belief of some negative person said something to you, usually your parent.
I
Sorry,
know.
mom and dad, right?
I know. They don't
Okay.
realize it, and it affects you forever.
Right, yeah, like my mom, I'll give you a for example. So my mom in college, my roommate would get boxes with like chocolate chip cookies and stuffed animals, and I would get an 8.5. I would get like a business size envelope, and inside of it was a clipping of the Wall Street Journal. And then I'd get this article from my mom that said, please remember that business people who are fat don't make as much money. And I was like, really? Like, like cookies and stuffed animals,
No.
admonishment about being fat, okay?
That's
Which
right.
do you think felt more loving? Okay.
It's for loving,
Right.
yeah.
So
And
like
that was her way of trying to love
yeah.
you.
And so there's points when I was probably 20 pounds heavier than I am right now. Just like yourself, you've lost weight over time. But that part of me, if I walked all the way back to the past part, that was like, that hurt me. Like that hurt me really bad. And then
Yes.
my present me who goes, yeah, no wonder I have issues with weight because look at the past me, and then goes all the way to the future me that says, it's not about the weight at all. It's about these other things. And, I
Exactly.
love you, and then you go back and you're like, see present me? And you're like, yes. And then your little future, the past me who got that mail in college, you're like, what
Okay.
about you?
She did the best she could, and I love it. And that's really what it is. And
Yeah.
we heal the past so
Yep.
we can move forward without having that pain carry forward.
Yeah.
I love that you said that too, because one thing I learned in the experiment as well is that because at first when I sat down to do my experiment and write the book, I was like, when I lose the weight, I'm going to love myself. I know that's it. But
Right.
clearly that was not the journey. And I very quickly learned that self-love is not about how you look. It's about how you live.
Yeah.
And
It's
so
not conditioned on anything.
exactly.
What you
Yep.
look like now, what you feel like now, whatever, like love yourself at this very moment. You're infinitely lovable right now. So it sounds like that's where you've gotten. Are you at that
Oh,
point after three
oh
years?
yeah. I feel so connected and in love with myself, and it can't even be. I can just be it. I can't even talk about it. Do you know what I mean? Like I can tell people I love myself, but it's really just my being, my presence, and who I am now. How I see myself is so different. I'm able to wake up in the morning and smile at myself. And my
Mm-hmm.
relationship, I healed all my eating disorders, and
Mm,
and what's beautiful is my body's naturally returning to its right size, and
mm,
there's no pressure. I used to have to get on the scale, and I hated whatever number it was. It didn't matter if I was 40 pounds underweight or 100 pounds overweight. It was always that was to blame, my body. But now there's such a healthy balance, and it's all
mm,
love. It comes back to just I am love.
that's very beautiful. So that's your 3-year journey. And so it
Yeah,
sounds like you
it's
have
turned
a
into
variety of different tools that you use, of which are in the book that describe your 3-year journey.
absolutely. The book is full of, I take people on the journey, but it's an extraordinary journey into what it really means to be alive, to be here, and to be present in your life. It's by far, it's my fourth book, but it's by far the most rewarding book that I've written
Yeah.
because I just poured my soul into it. And it's a
Oh,
gift. It's a gift. I hope people enjoy it.
yeah. Oh, that's very sweet. So your heart's in the book. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure your heart was in all the books, but in this
They
case,
were, of
like
course.
literally, yeah.
Because learning how to love yourself is a very personal thing as well. And I think a lot of us, we don't realize that we don't love ourselves. I didn't know for so many years that I didn't. We just kind of go through the motions. But when we can really, like you said, it's not this big grandiose change. It's just the small actions each day to say, I matter, I
Mm-hmm.
care. That
Mm-hmm.
add up to big changes.
So I want to take us through another common example that I hear and that you probably hear a lot with students, right? So I'll give you 3 different expressions of this, and I'm sure you have this kind of expression. It's either I'm too busy. I'm so busy at work. I can't do this. And so even though I would love to go on vacation, even though I'd love to go to your birthday party, even though I'd love to spend time by myself, I just don't have enough time. And
Yeah.
there's like a working person's version of that, and then a mom's version of that. I can't do that. I can't work out because I don't have enough time, and then it's going to affect my kid, and then if it affects my kid, then it affects my husband, and then it affects me because we're part of a family. So and then there's what are the teenage or college student version of that?
Yeah, so if you mean like what's keeping them from kind of doing the things they want to do or the things like an invitation somewhere.
Yeah, like it's basically it's self versus an expectation of other. Like someone has an expectation for you, or I don't even know, either that person truly has an expectation for you or you have crafted an expectation that doesn't even exist.
Yeah, well, what I hear a lot is I don't want to go, but I'm gonna go. I hear this quite a bit where they're like, I don't want to go, and then they go, and then sometimes they're like, oh, I guess it was fine, but they like are begrudgingly the whole time, or they overextend themselves and they say yes to everything, and then they're exhausted and they don't have any more time for themselves because they've basically done things that they didn't really want to do.
Mm.
What I often say and what I talk about again in the book is we have always enough time, money, and energy for what's truly, truly important to us. And
Mm.
so when we just get honest and say, is this a priority of mine? Then we're honest with ourselves. And so a lot of times as mothers, right, and women especially, we feel obligated to do things that we don't really want to do. And I think it comes back to if you go back, as you said, go back to different moments in your life when you really wanted it, you found a way. You found a way to get the money, or you found the time started to create itself. And otherwise, it's just not a priority. So be okay with that. If it's not a priority, don't worry. It'll be a priority when it really is supposed to be.
Hmm. I love
So
that. I think
let
that
yourself off the hook, yeah?
as we're talking about this, what I realize is that the root cause of this is guilt and shame. Right?
Yes.
We
It's
don't we feel
absolutely
guilty. Oh my gosh, it's my friend's best friend's birthday and I feel awful. She's having a big party and she's not even going to notice if I'm there or not, but I'm so tired. I've had a really hard week at work. I have to be there. And then you go and you're like, "Happy birthday." You know, because you're completely exhausted.
yeah. And so many of us do this.
Yeah. So is that when you talk about how prioritizing our desires? Is that what you meant by that, or is that something different?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I that is very self-loving and self-care. So there's actually different layers of self-love. And the first one is self-care. And self-care is not just drinking your green juice or having, counting your calories. I mean, that might work for some people, but I did that for years and I was depressed and eating disorders. What
Oh.
it really is about knowing what you really want within your heart. And so something you can do is think about, is this above an 8 for me? Like on a scale of 1 to 10, does this make me super charged up? Am I feeling like this is going to make me happy and alive? Is this what I really want to do? Because there's some times in our life where we really want to go to that birthday party and we can't wait. But there are other times where we know it's not the right time and it is not going to make us feel better.
Right.
And so I say if it's above an 8, then give yourself permission to go for it. If it's less, then really be honest and say, can I let this go or can I not do this?
Hmm.
And what you will start to notice is your energy is more charged up in every other area of your life because you're not overextending yourself.
Right. So if you actually are careful of your tank of energy and say, and you don't do no's when you do yeses when you go and do something really when it's an 8 or below, and you continually do that, you start hitting the empty on your gas tank, and then that's kind of like your that's not self care. Is that what you're referring? You said there are three
Exactly.
levels: self
Yep.
care, and what were the other levels that you were talking
Yeah,
about?
so there's so then it goes into self-compassion.
Mm.
We must be compassionate to ourselves through that process too, right? So, and a good example is through my self-love experiment. My best friend had a birthday party for her son, and it's you have to be there. I'm the aunt, right?
Right.
But I was so overextended that week, and I practiced this, and I ended up saying, no, I can't go. And, she understood. Of course, there's a lot of other people at the party, but I had to honor where I was and do what was best for me. And that was the most self-loving thing I could do because I was compassionate with myself. Instead of saying, you're a bad person, your best friend's, son just had a beautiful birthday and you missed it. I said, I'm so thankful that my body's telling me to rest. So I ended up taking a 4-hour nap that day. I had
Wow.
that that's what my body needed, but
Right.
4 hours. And that was a good example of saying, here's step one. So, I'm going to really, be honest about where I'm at. And it turns into self-compassion. And then we go into self-acceptance.
Mm.
And self-acceptance is about being where you are instead of where you think you're going to be.
Right. So when you said Okay, self-care is I'm exhausted. This is not an A. Self-compassion is like, you know what, it's okay. You can't make all these different things. It's too bad. And then what did the self-acceptance look like for you in that particular case?
So in that particular case, it was this is where I am today. This doesn't a lot of times we put different perspectives on what our situation is. So I could have easily gone into a rabbit hole of I'm a horrible aunt. My friend's going to be mad at me forever. I can't believe I did this, and taken that shame on. But self acceptance is saying this is exactly what I needed for me, and I accept that this is the best and for the highest good of all involved. Because if I
Mm-hmm.
would have gone to the party, I would have been cranky. I would have been mad and kind of resentful, even if I didn't say that. But that's what happens when we don't kind of allow ourselves to be in the process of following the steps, really.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that covers kind of a whole class of other non-self-loving, and then I love the various levels of it. You talk about the damaging effects of the almost paradise syndrome. What's that?
Yeah. This is the when I lose weight, I'll be happy. When I get
Ah,
That's
okay.
exactly it. And there's a whole section on that because that's how I started my experiment. I was like, when I find self love, then I can find my soulmate. But then it wasn't even about that. It's really about we all do this. And I encourage every listener to think about where you're doing this in your life, even if it's just small. It's like, oh, I'll put this off a couple days,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not going to make me happy. So it's that. We already talked about it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then they're showing up for joy. What's that?
Yeah, so this is my favorite because I truly learned in the self love experiment and in life, you know, joy is the best barometer for success,
Mm-hmm.
the best barometer. And so this looks like on your healthcare, if you decide you want to start doing a fitness routine or start a new diet, is it joyful for you? A lot of times we strain and we try to make things work and then we fall off the diet wagon, or we try to start a new venture and we look at outside results for the reason we should keep going. But that's when we stop and then we blame ourselves and we fall into shame again. But when it's joyful and you're looking at it as an experiment, because life is an experiment, we get to just kind of create what we want as we go. And as we do this, the joy is going to lead you forward.
Okay, that's interesting. So, I'm going to share with the listeners what happened for me today. So, because my son is leaving, I just don't feel the emotional lift. It's really hard. I'm just feeling a little bit not my normal self, a little bit lost, a little bit confused, which I think are the hallmarks of being in transition, which is exactly where I am and where I'm supposed to be.
Right.
But I had an appointment this morning where I was going to meet with my health coach, and I was like, I just can't do it. I'm so sorry, and I don't mean to cancel too hard before, but I literally cannot do this because if I did it, I would be doing so to make you feel happy, but do so at the detriment of my own happiness. And I'd be like doing it out of like, I'm not resentment. Like I'd be happy, but I'd be half there and half not there.
Right.
And I
Exactly.
wouldn't be listening and I wouldn't necessarily be appreciating and like moving forward on the things because I just am, oh, I'm too full right now. So if I had that extra meeting, I will just be too full and I won't listen and then you'll be disappointed and then I'll be disappointed in myself for not for not either saying something or not necessarily being all there for you. I can't be present, so I can't. And I felt weird to say to someone like, "Oh, come on, don't be lame. Just go." Even for you, I thought I emailed you and said, "Can we move it to like 2 to 3? It would help a lot because then I would be able to have lunch with my son." Which I
Yeah.
haven't been able to do. And so my joy, before coming here was like, okay, I just had lunch with my son. I'm really happy. And now I can have this interview, even though, like, I think I've been happier in my life, but, I'm feeling okay. Like, my energy has lifted from joy. From giving to myself, and thank you, by the way, but
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
being flexible. But I don't know. I don't know if you're like, oh, this was a disaster for me, or and right. I
You
mean, it probably wasn't that big
know,
of a deal.
Yeah, and that's exactly the point. What is so beautiful about what you just shared is you really honored yourself
Hmm.
and listened to what you needed first. And you took the time to reach out to different people to kind of set your schedule in a way that you knew would be the best honoring of you. And therefore, every single person is affected in a positive way. We're
Right.
having a better conversation. And I had no problem. I didn't even think twice about it. And a lot of times we think, I can't cancel. I had a really good friend who recently put a lot of money down on an Airbnb over her budget. And she didn't want to go back and say, I can't be here, even though it was like wiping out her savings for the long stay, because she was embarrassed and she didn't want to put that lady out.
Right.
And you're saying that too. I didn't want to put my trainer out. And we do this. And as women, especially, and as mothers, I think it's really about coming back and saying, you know what? Why do I feel like I can't put other people out, but I can put myself out? And that's the question we want to ask. And what you did today was so loving and so kind. And it's a beautiful day.
And I'm glad. And I think the thing that you said, I'm able to show up for you in a different way than had we had met an hour earlier. I've been like, oh, I didn't get to see my son because of this interview, like all that stuff.
Yeah.
And
Right.
that didn't happen, right? So I'm like, okay, my coffers are charged,
Yes,
and now I can be
absolutely.
there, and now it's respectful for you and respectful for me, and I
Yeah.
mean, because we're having this interview and it's a good interview, right? Versus, oh, I'll
Yeah.
just do it, and I think I probably could have, because we're professionals. I'm sure I would have been able to like generate the energy and feign it, but I think that's still, it's not. I don't know if that's fully loving for yourself, or I don't really know in that particular
I don't
case.
think,
But
personally, I don't think showing up to kind of charge through is really the best love that you can show yourself. It's really just trying to honor your commitments. And sometimes we don't need to honor our commitments. And that's the most loving thing, really. And I think what's really interesting about your story and what I see in my own career and personal relationships is when we're honest with ourselves and trust ourselves, which self-trust is the final part of self-love. You trusted your inner guide. And when we do that, the other people are actually usually a lot more supportive than we realize. Our fear kind of makes them feel like they're going to be like, no, you horrible person. But usually, I just had to cancel a book event at a bookstore for my book tour because I'm not going to that city after all. And before I was a little bit worried, like, oh, I just have to have this conversation. But I explained and they were so supportive. And it was just like when you're in your truth and you're aligned and connected, other people respond in a beautiful way.
And speaking of which, as we close up, I know that you're going to be coming in Seattle. Is that the one that you canceled?
No, I'm going to be.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So you're
No.
coming to Seattle, my hometown. You're going to be in Third Place Books in Ravenna on September 29th, which is
Yes.
perfect for moms who are having their kids back to school. Who knows
Yes.
what else is? So September 29th at 6 p.m. You're going to be here in Seattle. Yay! And then
And
it
it's
will
a
be
free event, so come on out.
okay, cool. Okay, and then it will be 1 month from when your book, The Self Love Experiment, launches, and so we can get that at Amazon on August 29th. Is that right?
Yeah, it's available in bookstores, Amazon, anywhere you like to shop for books. It's coming out. So
Yay! Okay, and tell us your URL if people want to buy it directly from your
yes,
website.
you can go to playwiththeworld.com.
I love that's the best URL ever. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for being flexible about rescheduling
Thank you. It's
too.
been beautiful to chat with you.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show and would love your support in any way by giving me comments below or to subscribe to the show or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.